Hello football tribers, welcome back to the channel. Robert K. Sarkos is my name. Thank you for all those that are taking the time to watch our content, and thank you to all our new subscribers. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like and share. Now, while I predicted that Manchester City will win this season's Premier League title, it goes without saying that it won't be a free fall for Pep Guardiola's side. They won't win it without competition. In any case, if there is any team that I do think that will give Manchester City a run for their money, that should be Arsenal. Because over the last two seasons, they have indeed come so close and they've shown us that they are ready to compete. The 2022-2023 campaign, they missed up on the title by just 5 points after, their title just collapsed in the last 2 months. And then last season, they took it to the wire, missing out on the title by just 2 points. 89, they finished with that tally, while Manchester City won it at 91 points. So, over the last two seasons, we've come to see that it has been a game of fine margins, as had been the case when the competition was largely between Pep Guardiola and Liverpool. We all remember that season when Manchester City won the Premier League title on 98 points, while Liverpool finished with 97 points. In any other seasons before that, or about that, Liverpool could have won the Premier League title, but it wasn't the case. So, it's a game of fine margins. And while I do stand with my prediction that Manchester City will still win their 50th Premier League title in the row, I do think that Arsenal will really push them beyond what their limits are accustomed to in terms of this season's Premier League title. So, but what could stand in Arsenal's way for their title push? Last season, they had a very good defense. They had a very good goalkeeper who won the Golden Glove in David Raya, up to about 15 clean sheets or so. They had the best defense, conceding just 29. I think Manchester City, the eventual champions, came right next to them, while the other teams were shipping in goals. So clearly, their defense was really solid. But like their manager did justify in when he was making the transfer of Ricardo Carafiori, he did identify that it is not a given that William Saliba will be available to play all 38 Premier League games, as was the case last season, while Gabriel Magalhaes featured in at least 34 of those fixtures. So he thought they needed some bit of cover in defense, and that's why they went on to sign Ricardo Carafiori from Bologna in a deal believed to be in the region of £42 million. Now, in that similar vein, they did welcome back Yurian Timber from a long-term injury because he missed the better part of last season with that ACL injury, the anterior cruciate ligament injury that he suffered early on last season in their victory against Nottingham Forest, I think on the opening day of the Premier League. So clearly, he thought he should fix something there. So when you look at their defensive covers, even if they were to be unfortunate to lose William Saliba for a couple of months within the season, they do have quite the figures that could slot in there and provide cover. And Yurian Timber is one of those. At left centre back, Ricardo Carafiori is available, while Ben White, we all know, is naturally a centre back, although he's being played at right back. And then, of course, Takahiro Tomiyasu is available. Never mind that he's currently injured, but should he be fit to play, he can always slot into that central defense and provide the necessary cover. Of course, at left back, they do have Zinchenko, Kieran Tierney, although not so much in the picture, is more or less a forgotten man at Arsenal, but he's still an Arsenal player, although still on injury. So when you look at their defensive lines, they really have those spaces covered. And should push comes to shove, when the worst goes to the west, Declan Rice can be pulled further back to play in that, defense. So looks like they do have cover there. In the goalkeeping role, there is still work to be done because they are willing to let Aaron Ramsdale go, but usually goalkeepers do not get so much injured, but you cannot still take your chances because we saw what that cost Newcastle last season when they lost Nick Pope to a shoulder injury for the later stages, for the final months of the Premier League season, and it was Martin Dubravka called on to, come and fill that void. So while injuries to goalkeepers are not very usual, they can still happen. So it begs the question, if they do let Aaron Ramsdale go, who will be their, goalkeeping cover? They are active in the market and they are interested in a goalkeeper from Espanyol. That's Juan Garcia. Should Aaron Ramsdale leave? There is interest from Ajax for Aaron Ramsdale as well as Southampton. Both sides are considering loan spells with an option to buy for the case of Wolverhampton Wanderers, while Ajax had an offer for the player. But let's see how all that shapes out. But in any case, they may need some cover there. Then when it comes to their midfield, this is where I think they are most vulnerable in the midfield. While they do have Thomas Partey still available, they still have Jorginho, they have Declan Rice, I still get the feeling that Thomas Partey, first of all, is very injury prone. He could fall off his pace. I mean, he's not growing any younger. Jorginho, while he's, that senior experienced player that you can rely on, it also begs the question, how many games in a row can you rely on him, for those high intensity games when you're competing for the Premier League, when you're competing in the UEFA Champions League? So you sort of feel that in that space, already after the game against Wolverhampton Wanderers, we did see Declan Rice limp off when he was replaced with what seemed to be some feel of tightness in his calf. So players can get these niggles during the course of the season, given the amount of games that they've played over the last couple of years. And I mean, injuries are something that cannot be avoided in the game of football. So they are bound to happen. So the question is, if you have Thomas Partey injury prone and he's out of the team, and God forbid you have Declan Rice on the sidelines, who are you relying on? Then you're just left with Jorginho. Yes, they are active in the market still. They do want to sign Mikel Merino, who I think will provide another good cover because he can play that 8 role. He can play as a deep 6, although preferably he prefers playing as an 8, which means, by the way, if they do sign Mikel Merino, we could see a switch of things up for Declan Rice to move back to that pivot role of the number 6, and then you have Mikel Merino play in the number 8 role. But for me, the biggest gist in that Arsenal midfield is Martin Odegaard, the captain. He's a very creative player, very skilled player. We've all enjoyed to watch him over the last 3 seasons at least, and he has contributed tremendously to this Arsenal team. He's scored about 30 goals in the last 3 seasons and provided 21 assists. As far as I'm concerned, Martin Odegaard is integral to Arsenal's success in that midfield, especially when it comes to the offensive part of the work. But also, we've seen him time and again lead, the counter defensive work. When they lose the ball, he leads that counter press, usually calling on to players. So he's very integral when it comes to goal contributions, providing assists and scoring goals. He's been right up there in Arsenal's best players for the last 3 seasons. Let's review his statistics during that course of period. Last season, 2023-2024, he scored 8 goals and provided 10 assists. The season before that, that's 2022-2023, scored 15 goals and provided 8 assists. And then when you wind things further back to the 2021-2022 Premier League season, when they sort of Arteta's project started to click, he scored 7 goals and provided 4 assists. So clearly, he is that important a player for this Arsenal side. So for me, the question is, what if you have Martin Odegaard for a long spell, like the way Manchester City were without Kevin De Bruyne for the first half of the season, literally? Who is a player that you call on to step into that role? They've let go of Emile Smith-Rowe, probably deservedly so. Then you're left with Fabio Vieira. Is he good enough to the caliber of Martin Odegaard to come and fill that void? Maybe yes, maybe not. In any case, he has not yet really shown that to us consistently that he's capable of doing it. So it's a bit of a 50-50, but on any day, I do not think he's a very reliable to take you long spells. Then you have an Ethan Nwaneri, very young player that's just been promoted to the senior squad, that you cannot really ask too much of. So that means there is a weakness in there that could eventually cost Arsenal a Premier League title. Then the other player is Bukayo Saka, who is, I think, arguably one of the most relied on players in recent times as far as Arsenal history books are concerned. It's very integral to everything that they do, whether offensively, whether defensively. He's always up there in the mix. We've seen it over the last 3 seasons at least, and even before that, carrying Arsenal literally on his shoulders. He takes responsibilities, he takes penalties. He's one player that I think is that one Arsenal player that is tackled the most by opponents. So he's that important to this Arsenal side. And then when you look at it, if they were to lose him for maybe a month or two, do they have enough cover in that squad to fill the void? Maybe yes, maybe not. Because in the options they do have for somebody that can play on that right flank in the attacking forwards, you do have Chris Nelson, who they are, by the way, willing to let go. They think he should be moving on. And so if he were to be slotted in, I do not think he can deliver to you what Bukayo Saka does deliver. You have Leandro Trossard, very talented player, but when you compare him to Bukayo Saka, I find the two players are quite different in terms of style and overall contribution. You have Gabriel Jesus, who himself is equally injury prone, that that can be used to play on that side of the pitch, but still all of the three wouldn't deliver to the extent of Bukayo Saka. Maybe you do not need them to deliver to the extent of Bukayo Saka, but the question is, are they 3/4 as good? Because when Manchester City were without Kevin De Bruyne, of course you could see the gap in there, that sort of hole that he had left. But then Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, do have those players that they can hold on to, fill those gaps. You have Phil Foden was, on the form of his life and all that. So let's look at Bukayo Saka's numbers over the last 3 seasons. I mean, he's arguably been Arsenal's best player for the last 3 seasons, per se, depending on how you may want to, place your argument. But here are his numbers. Over the last 3 seasons, he has made an overall contribution of about 41 goals and 27 assists, and he's been sort of, progressing or growing in terms of contribution. In the 2021-2022 Premier League campaign, he scored 11 goals and provided 7 assists. The following season, 2022-2023, scored 14 goals and provided 11 assists, while last season he scored 16 goals and provided 9 assists. So clearly, is that important a player for this Arsenal side? So for me, the question is, if they were to lose Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, do they have the right members in the squad to come and fill those voids? Because as we've seen in defense, they do have the players to rotate around. Then the other very important thing about the title chances, what puts it at risk, is squad rotation. When you look at Manchester City, over the course of a Premier League season, we've often seen it when a player is even on form and then Pep Guardiola chooses to start him on the bench or sit him out for the next 1 to 3 games. We've seen it with Phil Foden, we've seen it with Erling Haaland, we've seen it with so many players, with the exception of Rodri in recent times. But he tries to rotate his squad and give players a rest. When you look at the Arsenal players on the other side, I mean, usually Mikel Arteta goes with his core team all the time for as long as they are available. And that's why you have Bukayo Saka having played, I think, literally missing about 4 games in the last 3 Premier League campaigns. You had William Saliba play all 38 games last season. Martin Odegaard missed about 3 Premier League games, and that was through injury. So that clearly paints for you the kind of picture of what is happening with Arteta and his squad. And then, like I said, if they are to push Manchester City for the title, and possibly because they have the ability to do it, edge Manchester City over the Premier League title, it will be fine margins, and that is what brings us to the striking situation. when we went into the January transfer window last season, every Arsenal fan that I know online, that I know offline, that I interacted with at the time was clamoring, calling on Mikel Arteta to sign a striker because they weren't scoring enough goals. And yet, in the second half of the season, things turned for the better. They were scoring plenty of goals while conceding fewer goals in return. Because when you compare them with Manchester City, they did score 91 goals, and I think Man City scored 96 goals overall. So one would be quick to argue that if they were able to score all those goals, why then do they need to sign a striker? Here's why. Like I said, the Premier League title has shown us over the last many seasons that it's one of fine margins. So it could be that striker that can score for you between probably 20 to 25 goals in a season, or perhaps even 18, depending on how regular he's given time to play, that gets you over the edge, that gives you that extra advantage over Manchester City, that those extra goals that they score are what give you the advantage. We've seen it time and again in some games where you think maybe a striker could have gotten that one chance, that one, fine chance that they created and buried it away to give them the advantage. When they lost to Aston Villa last season, it wasn't because they hadn't created chances at Villa Park when they lost by a goal to nil. Yes, they did lose in the reverse fixture again by 2 goals to nil. You could see there in elements before Aston Villa opened the scoring that they had missed their own chances, which naturally maybe a striker would have not missed. Maybe he could have converted one and the game would have been different. So, given that it is a competition of fine margins, that's why I do think that Arsenal, being without that natural or formative striker, could eventually cost them a Premier League title race. Ivan Toney at Brentford is there for the taking. Of course, they've had conversations about Victor Osimhen, they've had conversations about Victor Gokayes, but none have materialized. Okay, they've not formalized those, interests. As far as we are concerned, maybe something will change in these final days of the transfer window because it closes at the end of the month. But should that not be the case, then I do think that could potentially cost Arsenal a Premier League title race. Do let me know if you agree with those views or if you disagree with them. Let me know what your opinions are down in the comment section, and I'll see you next time. Stay blessed.